Chapter 95. It took an afternoon, an evening, and an entire morning. But on Sunday at noon, when it was finally finished and they collapsed in the living room to examine the fruits of their labor, they all arrived at the same conclusion. "Is it just me," said Alden from where he was sprawled on top of the Chesterfield sofa, enjoying the smell of the soft leather, "or is this place really awesome now? It's perfect." Hoyu was playing with the app on his tablet that controlled the dimmers on all of the apartment's new lighting. "Thank you for letting me paint the Ankla fixture copper." Alden stared up at it. "I think we are firmly in luxury hunt ski lodge territory now, so it fits." "Sonny likes it, too," said Loot. Sonny was the fake polar bear he had mounted on the wall at the end of the hallway that separated their bedrooms. They had given him a pair of sunglasses, to protect Lexi from his plastic eyes. "We still need to put up the curtain around the bathtub," Lexi reminded them. He had claimed one of the new armchairs as his personal favorite seat. Any time they took a break, he planted himself in it before anyone else could even take a step toward it. "If Loot's going to spend 3 hours a night in there," I was contemplating. "You could have used the shower at the same time. It's not like I locked you out." "When do we invite people over to see the place?" Hoyu asked. "It's done unless we decide to paint, so never," Loot and Lexi said simultaneously. "Why?" Hoyu sounded surprised. Alden rolled over onto his side to watch them. Hoyu and Lexi were both in athletic wear. Lexi was wearing a sleeveless shirt with a logo for a ballet school where he had, until recently, been taking classes. Loot had taken off his eye patch last night while they worked, and he hadn't put it back on today. He said it wasn't comfortable when his face was sweaty. "Someone who hates me will come over and piss on Alden's rugs. Kong will want to throw a theme party in our room the second he sees it." Hoyu looked between the two of them and then at Alden. "I don't mind the occasional guest, but if someone pisses on my rugs you have to help me kill them," Alden told him. "I don't think anyone would do that. They violated a pair of my sneakers on Thursday. Alden is my witness." Lexi's expression twisted. "Wait, you're serious about someone pissing on your things? What kind of animals are you hanging out with?" "I'm not hanging out with." "How do they do it?" Hoyu asked. "Can you not dodge fast enough?" "They don't pee on them when my feet are in them. And it's not someone I'm hanging out with. Some disgusting psycho gets them when I'm in class on the art and culture floor. Anyway, who cares about my shoes? I have plenty. But we have to protect Sonny, the rugs, and Angela Aubergine." "You guys," Hoyu said plaintively. "I want to show it off a little. I bet nobody else has a room this cool. And people keep inviting me over to see theirs." "There are a few people I'd like to have over at some point," Alden said. "Who?" Lexi asked suspiciously. "Rabbits I got to know in intake." "Do you really plan to keep Khan out of the apartment forever?" Hoyu asked Lexi. "He's your brother. And he lives one floor above us. It's not just Khan. I have analyzed all of the other boys in our acceptance group," said Lexi. "And I'm sure none of them need to be here." Luke looked at Alden. "Is the hero track that bad, or is he just making angry noises again?" Alden grinned. "They are not all bad. Finley seems really nice." "Too nice," Lexi said, as if Finley had committed a crime. "He'll bring over one of his new roommates, and his new roommates include the Aqua Brute." "Do we hate the Aqua Brute?" Luke asked. Alden shook his head. "Jeffy is. We don't hate him," Hoyu said. "He is a little lively." "Yeah. Lively. Lively is bad. And is it true Tyed got accepted to the program with you guys? Because I didn't see that coming even with an S. She's always seemed so nervous. And Dartmeister is an unusual choice. You wouldn't think." Knock, knock, knock. "It could be any of them," Lexi hissed as Alden stood up. "Don't answer it." Alden raised an eyebrow at him. "It's just the groceries we ordered. To fill the fridge. I got a message from the shopper." Line of asterisks. They spent most of the afternoon working on their own projects and minding their own business. After lunch, all of them naturally drifted apart to take care of what they needed to. Hoyu was studying in his room with the door open. Lexi was in his with the door closed. Lute alternated between doing homework on a large tablet in the living room and practicing on a harp smaller than Angela, and electric one with headphones so that he wouldn't disturb the rest of them. Every time Alden stepped out of his room to grab something from the kitchen, he felt more and more impressed with the fact that Lexi actually had managed to find people who could stand to be around him and each other and also quietly pursue their own interests for hours at a time. Maybe we're all on our best behavior because it's new, but this is nice. He was studying, too. Magic. At some point he had to get soundproofing for his room. Some kind of painfully expensive write-work setup probably. But he'd eventually have wanted that wherever he was staying. For now, he was working with the door locked. He settled onto his new learning cushion. He had picked out one that looked as similar to the cushion from the lab as possible, but it was still disappointingly inferior. It was better than nothing, though, and until he found a piece of furniture he wanted for the bedroom, it had a place of honor on top of a shag rug. Since he'd finished all his homework with Bo, he could sit and practice with the Ori out for hours. He even let himself pull the memory foam pillows off the bed so that he could hit them a few times with the square punch spell. It wasn't silent, but it just sounded like someone smacking pillows. If anyone heard him and wondered, he'd say he was punching them the old-fashioned way for some kind of practice. At 6 o'clock, he tucked his Ori out back under his cuff bracelet and opened his curtains. In the girls' dormitory across from theirs, someone was putting a line of electronic tea lights in her window for Diwali. She spotted Alden, and they waved at each other. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. On Thagund, in the crater that was home to the lab, it was night now. Cold, dark, and starless. Alisart's single quotations team should have made it to the area last week. They were probably beyond it now. Every day, the quaternary erased a little more of that broken world, and every day, it grew just a little more distant from Alden. A chattering group was passing by on the walkway below him. When he opened his eyes again and looked down, he recognized Astrid, Heloisa, and a couple of other girls from the party. It's good to be settling in. It feels like I'm finally a part of something that might last for a while. Hoyu, this is our official room chat, right? Lute, yes. Hoyu, I'm going to eat at Cafeteria North. Do you all want to come? Alden, I'll come. Lute, bring me something. I'm filling the tub. Lexi, we need a schedule for the tub. You can't just occupy it from 6 to 9 every night. Lute, bring me something I can eat in the tub. Alden smiled and grabbed his messenger bag from the desk. A few minutes later, he and Hoyu were about to cross the street in front of the university's main dining hall, when Lexi sprinted up behind them. You know he's really requesting that we bring him a full 3-course meal. He groused. Are we his maids? Who does that? He wants steak frites and a creme brulee from the French place. I'm kind of admiring his taste, said Alden. How does somebody eat steak in the bath? He addresses that. You'll see if you keep reading the group chat. He wants a bread roll for it. And blue cheese dressing so he can make his own sandwich, Hoyu added. Well, we're obviously not going to do that, Lexi scoffed. Alden smiled. I am, though. Lexi stared at him as the light changed and they crossed the street. Why? Why wouldn't I? It's easy, and I like carrying food with my skill. I can deliver perfect hot French fries. It's powerful. He was telling me he keeps ice cream in his pockets sometimes, Hoyu said. He offered to bring me stuff when I want, too. We should have roommate perks, Alden said. I'll bring you hot fries for the bathtub, too, Lexi. Lexi rolled his eyes. I can get my own food. Just wait. One day you're going to be miserable and hungry, and you'll be glad you live with me then. The weekend crowd at Cafeteria North was always lighter, but at this hour, it was still fairly busy. They all three headed for the salad bar. It had enough options that Alden could eat there every day for a month without repeating a topping, so he was trying not to be a whiner about the fact that it tasted like fresh produce instead of angel tears. He threw some sweet potato cubes on a bed of arugula. Then he added a scoop of roasted almonds. Chipotle tofu? Yeah, okay. There was a girl ahead of him counting the number of cubes she took. I can't bring myself to do that. I'm hungry. And lazy. Natalie, I need you. We could go out with the others for just a little while tonight, Hoyu was telling Lexi as Alden joined the two of them at a table near the fountain. It would be fun. I actually have a club meeting tonight, Alden said. You're in a club already. Which one? I was invited. I've never gone. The B-list. Oh, your rank club, said Lexi. The guy who invited me said they had private use of the gym at 8 on Sundays, so I thought I'd try it. Hoyu stabbed at his salmon and lettuce. The B-list gets private gym time. The A-list doesn't. Lexi won't even go with me to any of the events because he says it's just a bunch of dumb social hours. The A-rank club would have to persuade a lot of faculty members to work overtime to monitor us in the gym, said Lexi. There are less than 40 Bs. Even if every single one of them shows up each week, they probably only need to convince a couple of advisors. No fair. Reconsider that, Lexi muttered, looking down at his own food. He'd gotten the salmon, too, but he'd separated all of his ingredients into piles on his plate instead of making a salad out of them. Hoyu blinked at him, then back at Alden. He chewed for a while. Nope. Still unfair, he decided. My mom says the Bs who get picked for Hero Track are some of the best students anyway, with some of the most unique powers. So no pity from me for being lower ranks. If I thought that way, I'd just have to feel sorry for myself for not being NS. What's really unfair is that the superlatives have club gym time, too, Lexi said. Khan was looking into it. The S-rank club calls themselves the superlatives. Alden asked. Of course they do. B-list is some decent, self-deprecating humor. A-list is just embarrassing when there's a rank club above it, isn't it? You should become club president and change the name, Hoyu said brightly. Lexi considered him. I've told you before, the fact that you deliver jokes in the exact same tone you use when you're being serious is why nobody can ever tell when you are joking. Were you joking? Alden asked in surprise. Hoyu nodded. The class-specific combat clubs have private gym time with special mentors, said Lexi. So I can join the other Meisters for that, and you can hang out with the brutes. Oh. Alden doesn't have a class combat club. You should join the brutes. Do you hate him? He's a fragile combatant with handheld shields. I admit it sounds like a difficult thing to pull off no matter who he is going up against, but the Fisticuffs Club is definitely his discomfort zone. Well, if he wants to win at our level. He's good versus Shaper? Shaper, Lexi agreed. Ranged Meister and Spellflinger adjusters, too, said Hoyu. Depends on the Meister. Depends on the adjuster. You can say that about any class. Wait, how are you even trying to win fights, Alden? Alden swallowed a bite of sweet potato. What do you mean? If shields are your main thing, then are you aiming for battles of attrition? He wants you to say yes because he's going for Dura Brute, and he thinks battles of attrition are the best. Just refusing to stop is the most satisfying way to win, Hoyu said, waving his fork around with passion. Let them come at me with a fancy spell they can only cast 3 times or an overpowered hit that'll break every bone in their body if they fatigue their protective talents. Let them double on their stats and become legends. But when the dust clears, I'm still there. Saying, hello. Yes, you did look flashy. But now what have you got for me? He does make it sound epic. I'm aimless by comparison. I honestly don't know how I win fights, Alden said. I always wanted to be a support, so in that case, it wouldn't be strictly necessary for me to be able to defeat another Avoidal by myself. As long as I could keep myself alive for long enough. But if we're talking about me fighting people on my own, my skill will be great at protecting me if I use the right objects. It's also got some interesting, you can carry heavy stuff. Hoyu said. Isn't it great? The first thing I did when I fixed was wander around the house lifting things I couldn't before. I haven't practiced much with, how much of a hit can that shield of yours take? Lexi asked. Magically and physically? I'm not. How big of an object can you protect? I have no idea. Lexi frowned. Hoyu looked amused. How can you not know? Are you not curious? I am. Of course. But it's changed since I practiced with Joe and Kibby. And it was a lot easier for someone like Hoyu, with superheroes for parents, to safely experiment with his limits before starting school. Well, don't worry about it, said Hoyu. Try stuff you're curious about in rank club. If the other bees are cool, ask them if Lexi and I can come by sometime. Lexi sighed. Don't just invite yourself to dominate the lower rank. I'm here to improve. They are too. Maybe they'd like to try their skills on a Durabrute. And your weapon's unusual. It would be great practice for all of us. Don't mention this idea to the B-list, Alden. And Zedora social dynamic, they'll hate it. Hoyu flicked a caper at him. You think everyone is a rank-biased backstabber. I bet the bees are really nice and open-minded. At 7:30 p.m., Alden stepped out of the men's locker room in the MPE building wearing his very own gym suit. It had been waiting for him in his new locker, along with a list of care instructions that boiled down to, don't store it in your dorm. Don't do experiments on it. Use the cleaner cabinet in the on-site laundry room before you start to stink. He crossed the hallway, wheeling his giant suitcase behind him. The gym doors opened before he reached them, and Max stepped through. You're early, too, the adjuster said, taking in Alden's unitard and the suitcase with a glance. Yeah, I thought half an hour was overboard, but there are already a couple of other guys getting dressed. Suitcase? I'm planning to experiment with it. And probably destroy it in the process. It was a good and faithful suitcase. And it was also taking up way too much space in his bedroom. Live and learn, and buy a stupidly large duffel bag next time instead. He entered the gym. There was a girl running laps, and a couple of people were stretching off to the side. A boy was doing double-footed jumps up the bleachers. The floor's off. One of the stretchers called as soon as she spotted Alden. Floor's off. Almost everyone else repeated in unison. A safety call. He went to the storage room under the bleachers. It was a large area with signs on the wall designating it as a backup safe zone for multiple kinds of emergency. Though the people fleeing the emergencies would have to share space with a lot of equipment. When I was here for testing day, I saw. There. About halfway in, along one wall, there were stacks of elemental weights for shapers. The scent bags were piled up between refillable water bags and larger lithomass bags. Alden wondered what exactly those were stuffed with. Is there a sign-out sheet for taking these, or can we just have them? He heard the storage room door shut. He didn't think anything of it until the boy and girl who had just entered started whispering to each other a few feet away from him. Can anyone borrow these? He asked, pointing at the sandbags. The boy, death pale with straight black hair that hung like curtains down to his collarbones, smiled. That depends. Are you one of us? Or are you an interloper? An interloper? Alden asked. Those are B-rank only bags right now, said the girl. She had the letter B on each cheek in green paint that matched her eyeshadow, and a frizzy blonde puff of a ponytail stuck up from the back of her head. Oh. I'm a B. I'm Alden. I'm here for the clue. BB, said the boy, he's ours. Before Alden could fully appreciate the fact that there was a B-rank named BB who wore two B's on her face for makeup, she was upon him. Let us teach you your duties. Ding. Ding. As Alden looked around to see where the ringing sound was coming from, BB grabbed him by the hand and hauled him toward a rules and regulations for gym use poster. Do you have bells? He asked the guy. The other boy's thumbs flicked against the underside of a pair of black rings he wore on his index fingers. Dong. Ding. Rings that sound like bells? He soon found himself with his back against a stack of alternate surface tiles for the gym floor. BB and the dark-haired guy were standing next to the poster with grins on their faces. Repeat after me, said the boy. The ranks are our enemies. They are. What kind of kooky welcome ritual is this? The storage room door opened, and Max stepped through. Are you new blood or an interloper? BB demanded. What do you? A moment later he was trapped against the floor tiles with Alden. All right, again, said the guy with the bell jewelry. The ranks are our enemies. Enemies, BB hissed. Ding. Ding. Put the names of your first victims on the beat list, the guy intoned. This is the beat list, BB whispered. Then, she made a dramatic downward slicing gesture with one hand, and the poster on the wall behind her tore in two. Behind it was a large chart, with the names of club members on the left and boxes full of other students' names out to the right. What's happening? Max asked via text. I'm not sure. Do you think we're being hazed? Alden replied. Ding. Dong. Max crossed his arms over his chest. I just wanted to try some things out in the gym, and now I feel like this club might be a bad idea. Every bee needs a target. Every bee, not again, you two. We talked about this. The guy who just stepped into the storage room was wheeling a pair of weapon cases behind him. They were stamped with the words, Rahul and right work do not touch. You weirded out those girls last time so bad they never came back to club. I'm starting to think you're doing it on purpose to hog advisor attention. We apologized to those girls. BB protested. They were just too weak for the B list, the boy with the bell ring said. He waved at Max. Welcome. Don't run away. We require new blood to carry on our holy purpose. Max was looking over his shoulder at the chart on the wall. Your holy purpose is making a hit list for ranks in your combat classes? It's very simple, said the girl, pointing first at Max and then at Alden. As a B, you are not allowed to suck the most in your year. There must be some A's beneath you. The first years have been letting us down hard lately. BB. Snapped Rahul. They can't fight for shit. Francis. Get lost, you two, before I tell Instructor Plim you're abusing the new first years. You Walden, go. You're a mean old man, Rahul, said BB, bouncing past him toward the door. I'm gonna break your guns before you graduate. Francis watched her leave. I know what you're both thinking, he said to Max and Alden. He made a curving hourglass shape in the air with his hands. She's amazing, but she is my girlfriend. We're madly in love. Don't make me use these on you for real. He flicked his rings. Ding. Ding. While Alden and Max watched with equally baffled expressions on their faces, Rahul grabbed Francis by the back of his unitard and dragged him toward the door. I'm not threatening them, man. He said, laughing. I'm laying down boundaries. Rahul shut the door in his face, then he turned to them. Hi. I'm so sorry about those two. Most people here are sane. I'm Rahul. 3rd year. I'm already taking half my classes at uni, and I graduate from high in March when I pass the final combat course. Until then, I seem to be club president. He shook their hands. So you're our new adjuster and our new rabbit, he added before they could even introduce themselves. Instructor Plim is enthused. I mean she's always that way. But she's extra that way this time around. Alden glanced at the beat list. If they were really keeping score of the ranks they'd defeated, then Francis and someone above him named Ella Clara were not people he wanted to pick a fight with. Then what Rahul had said caught up with him. Is Instructor Plim the B-list advisor? That would be great. The creative applications teacher was someone he really wanted to work with, and he couldn't take one of her classes until next quarter. Yes. All the other clubs keep trying to poach her. It would be a disaster for us. Fortunately, there are an abnormal number of abnormal people at B rank. And she just loves the fact that we're mostly desperate enough to try whatever she suggests. He rummaged in a cardboard box hidden behind the floor tile stack and pulled out another poster and a roll of tape. He started covering the beat list with it. Don't feel pressured to take part in this defeat the A's nonsense unless you find it motivating. It's not a real part of the club. It wasn't when I started at CNH anyway. B's in the hero track tend to be extremely studious and hardworking, but our second years are all viciously competitive. On top of that, it might be some strange side effect of being around Ella Clara. Don't bother her, and she won't bother you. Rahul patted the poster into place and sighed. Sometimes I feel boring in this club. A right specializing in multi-object launchers should be one of the odder people in the room, but not here. Max cleared his throat. During my first time applying to the school. Alden looked over at him in surprise. The interview committee for the final round said that a B shouldn't expect acceptance unless we had something to offer that a higher rank with the exact same subclass couldn't. It's not an uncommon point of view. A bit of a prove you're special enough or go back to F-City attitude. Rahul shrugged. It's understandable, so there's no point worrying over it. I suggest you see it as a challenge to rise to. He knelt and started unlatching his weapon cases. There should be plenty of people in the gym by now. Enough to dilute the more unusual personalities. Go say hello. Can I use the sandbags? Alden asked quickly. Sure. In general, it's fine to use anything in here as long as you are sticking close to its intended purpose. And if you want to use things for non-intended purposes, Instructor Plim isn't exactly difficult to persuade. I bet not. Alden unzipped his suitcase and started adding sandbags. Max grabbed a box labeled ground drone and headed for the door. The club president spoke up again just before he reached it. By the way, Francis's class clown routine is partially an attempt to put people at ease. Since he is this way, I don't know that it works the way he means for it to, especially since he's trying to make everyone think his mind control bells aren't scary by using them to punctuate regular sentences. Well, just a warning. Have fun. Max's eyes widened. Yes. I'll try. What the hell is a mind control bell? Alden wondered as he loaded another sandbag in. He hadn't felt himself being targeted, and he hadn't felt the need to do what Francis said, so he guessed it was all right. Alden. If you want a heavy weight, you don't have to fill a suitcase with smaller ones. There are 120-kilo bags on the bottom. This is better, I think. The big bags looked like giant sausages, and they didn't have as many handholds as the suitcase did. Anyway, using luggage with his skill was poetic. When he had 100 kilos, he zipped it. Then he discreetly placed Joe's enchanted ring on the ground beside the handle. Would you mind telling me to pick all of this up? It's for my skill. Rahul looked up from assembling a large gun that had some unexpectedly squishy-looking parts. Sure. Pick it up. Thanks, said Alden. He found the part of his affixation that controlled the number of separate protective fields he could maintain. Don't think of it as a switch. Go for something just a little more creative. He grabbed the side handle of the bag. That part of the affixation tried to close, an automatic setting to prevent double activation. He held it in place, trying to paperify the process in his mind so it would fit with his new metaphor. Like keeping an origami piece that's been partially unfolded from snapping back shut along the creases. He picked up the ring. He slipped it onto the middle finger of his left hand, then he stood. Both items were preserved. The suitcase was light, physically at least. He let his attention leave that part of the affixation, and he felt it close. Double running the skill on objects had been absurdly exhausting on Munthagun, and now it was only slightly less absurdly exhausting. He was debating the merits of making it his hidden handicap. He didn't think he needed to hide the power level of his skill much at this point. He'd shown it off a lot during the trials, and the idea of the system granting him a fake profile was so absurd that he was sure he wasn't in danger of provoking suspicion yet. Not accurate suspicions at least. Humans were going to assume any additional prowess was the result of a dozen more likely factors before they ever got around to thinking, maybe the system lies to us about this one specific 16-year-old guy. But carrying multiple preserved objects was something he wanted to practice anyway, and if as a side effect, it made him look a little less like an outlier, that was a good thing. All right. Now stay cool, Alden, he thought as he headed back into the gym. If you drop the skill and break some part of your body with a 220-pound bag, everyone will think you're too much of a dumbass to be allowed. Chapter 96. Alden was keeping his goal for the night simple. Assuming they were allowed to do whatever they wanted with their club practice time, he was just going to use this opportunity to learn what it felt like to run around and protect himself with a burden of this size, shape, and weight. How did the 100 kilos of unpreserved sandbags trapped inside the preserved suitcase affect his skill fatigue? How did moving around with it work? Could he reliably keep his hands on it to maintain entrustment without doing something like strapping it to himself? Was it even practical to try to weaponize something like this? Being able to easily move this much weight is already so good, and it's probably going to be more useful in the long run for transport instead of creating ridiculously heavy weapons. He kept thinking of how much easier something like this would have made his life 3 months ago. Has it really just been 3 months since I was hauling equipment and drums around the lab to help prep for Akibi's great big boom? Less than 3 months. But it felt like a lifetime ago. Chelena North was pretty combat-oriented, even at the high school level. The constant competition and pressure from facing a wide variety of other talents was part of what encouraged people to intuit new uses for their powers, stretch their abilities, and level. But Alden was looking forward to learning a lot of the less flashy stuff more. Moving large objects. Running. Concealment. Dealing with complicated environments. He'd kill for a wilderness survival course, but wilderness survival was one thing that an avowed almost never needed. It wasn't like you could get lost in a desert and starve to death when you had the system in your head. Maybe the university offered special classes for people who were anticipating summons? I have to check that out. He kept thinking about the big demon on Munthagund. The one he hadn't ever properly seen or had to deal with. He wanted to be able to survive if he ran into something like that, so combat training was good. But even if he had to fight something or someone to survive in the future, that was just one way to die. There were a million other ways that had nothing to do with combat at all. What if the car hadn't existed? What if there hadn't been mover discs to flip it? What if the water at the lab had quit a couple of weeks into his stay? There was magic for all of that. His skill. Stats. Spells he could learn. So, I'll do whatever the school wants, but my personal focus should be filling in those gaps. He still wanted to hit something really hard with the suitcase before the practice hour was over, though. Alden spotted Andrei sitting on the bottom bleacher. The Polish boy was holding his cudgel in his lap and talking to a girl wearing a t-shirt over her gym suit that said, "Ask me about Jimpy," in black marker. Before he could head over to say hello, his interface flashed. Floor on. A small floor status notice remained even after the larger notification faded away. "All right, my little bees," a voice called. Alden looked over to see Luna Plym wheeling herself backward into the gym in a rolling desk chair. Her bright red hair was contained in a bun by a pair of pencils, and she was wearing a yellow raincoat over her own unitard. A trio of basketball-sized water balls were following her around like they were her pets. "You're free to wreak whatever havoc you had planned for tonight. Let me know if you need me to set up a private block for dueling or practice. Injury realism is set to 10%. The warning ouch." BB shouted. "Thanks, Instructor Plym," several people called. "If you need any advice, I'll be in my office," the teacher said. Then she kept on rolling her office chair across the huge gym until she and her pet water came to a stop in the center of the floor. "Instructor, kill permission has to be explicit. I forgot again." "Thank you, Rahul. Everyone, you can kill your clubmates today if they don't mind. This isn't class. Experiment fearlessly. Ella Clara, I got all 8 of your messages this week. Yes, you can come see me. I've been thinking about new ideas for your special friend." The girl who'd been lapping the gym ever since Alden arrived ran toward the instructor, her chin-length brown hair swinging. A couple of people grumbled. 4 students chased after Ella Clara to wait for their own turn to talk to the instructor. She was the one who had the most victories on the beat list, Alden thought, staring at the girl's back. And what's her special friend? His best guess was that she was a Meister, and her friend was her weapon. What should I start with? They only had an hour. It seemed much too short now. Part of him wanted to go lurk around Plym, hoping to talk to her, but it seemed like other people had been in touch with her throughout the week asking specific questions about powers. It was probably a dick move to try to edge his way in ahead of the established club members when he just had a general thirst for advice. Now that he knew she was their advisor and she worked this way, he would think of some questions and message her to prep for next time. He looked around to see what everyone else was doing for their own practice. There were 29 students here tonight, which meant Alden was seeing most of the B ranks in the program all at once. 3 pairs were fighting with their powers already. Francis was wandering around talking to people and making various tones with his bell rings. The boy who'd been jumping up the bleachers earlier was now doing gymnastics. Wow, badly. Alden cringed as the guy attempted an aerial and landed on his head. But he jumped right up again and kept going. The gym is great. You can try out so many things you'd be rightfully scared to do otherwise. He watched as a girl ran past with a pair of custom-made kites flying over her head. Alden, are you needing a partner for something? It was Andre. The girl in the Jimpy shirt was beside him. Alden smiled at them. I was taking everything in. I've got a suitcase here that will protect me from hits and weigh 100 kilograms when I drop it. He lifted the suitcase a little higher. I'm hoping to get a feel for using something this size and shape as a shield. The girl leaned forward with an interested expression. Are you a you? She asked in a French accent. Rabbit. Ha ha. Right. Andre shook his head at her. Alden's rabbitness had come out during a discussion and engaging with the unexpected a few days ago. Oh no. Sorry. I love rabbits. I had a pet rabbit when I was little. Greater than, it's fine. Laura and I were going to set up for blind fighting, said Andre. With some target drones if we could not find a partner. You could be our target instead? What's blind fighting? Help us lay down the grass. I will show you. Line of asterisks. Andre had such an honest face and such forthcoming mannerisms that Alden had almost forgotten he'd initially been suspicious of the Polish boy's eagerness to take Cudgelmeister off his hands. He'd said he wanted to offload Chainer quickly, which was apparently true. And he'd said he wanted a Meister class with the highest possible strength stat so he'd meet requirements for a hero team internship he had in mind down the road, which was no doubt also true. But he hadn't been completely honest. Because what he'd most wanted was a very specific Meister skill that was only offered to a few of the rarer and more brutish-seeming subclasses, Meister of Knuckles and Meister of Cudgel among them. Andre knew about it because his Antivora uncle was a high-rank Knucklemeister who'd acquired it several years ago as a secondary skill. It was called Throw. With it, Andre could make the force of his weapon strikes land on the other side of whatever he hit. He could swing his club at a pane of glass, leave it unharmed, and destroy a target several yards beyond it. It turned a close combat weapon into one with some range. And Andre was planning to build his whole battle style around it. His uncle apparently loved it and had been fixated on leveling it ever since he got it. Andre said it was at least a 9 top, with every level increase boosting the distance the Throblo could travel. It made being a dude with a club so much more cool than Alden had anticipated. Being able to fight at different distances is good for a Meister, Andre explained as they positioned tall foam blocks in a line across the gym. Laura and a couple of helpers were laying down trays of sod to make patches of the life element. And ground, incidentally. Throblo gives many options. I can hide behind walls and still attack. I can damage things held in locked rooms. Versatility. It sounds awesome, Alden said enthusiastically as he maneuvered another block into place to build the wall Andre would be heading through. The main problem Andre faced with his chosen fighting style was that sometimes he wouldn't be able to see the targets he wanted to hit. He had no shielding skills and wasn't likely to acquire them, so he planned to use the environment as his shield. But at present, he didn't have any way of detecting things through opaque walls. He had a list of spell impressions, sensory enhancements, and magical tools he would be collecting and mastering over the coming years that would allow him to visualize or hear things through solid objects. But until then, blind fighting practice. To improve my reasoning and aiming. And my life shaping. Laura called. The French girl was a third year. To distinguish herself from other life shapers and be more useful at their rank, she decided a year ago to make a shift from focusing on more traditional telekinetic attacks to using her control over plants for detection. She said she was still an amateur, but when someone stepped on a sod tile she was using her power on, she should know. and she would be giving Andre targeting directions based on that. "I have a trait that makes me move better over ground," Alden told them. "Should I use it to make things harder for you?" "A little," Andre said after thinking about it for a moment. "But not too much. I am not that good at hitting what I can't see." After they finished setting up, Alden had his suitcase full of sentry entrusted to him, and they got started. It was dull for the first several minutes. Alden walked slowly between sod tiles with his suitcase, being sure to stand on each one for at least a few seconds before heading to another. He held his shield between him and the foam wall, just in case, but none of Andre's strikes came close to hitting him. The Cudgelmeister had done versions of this exercise before, but he and Laura had never partnered together to try to coordinate. There was a lot of French-Polish-English discussion going on over there as they sorted themselves out. But then, about 5 minutes in, they finally got quiet. Did they switch to texting? Alden wondered as he stepped off one patch of grass and headed for another. A moment later, something smashed into his bag. It was a solid hit. Not like Heloisa throwing a chunk of concrete, but more substantial than the wind strikes that Tatiana Evans, the Sky Shaper Alden had defeated in his first ever duel, had delivered. "You got me," he called excitedly. "I told you I knew where he was." Greater than Laura cried. Andre poked his head around the edge of the wall. "Are you all right?" Alden nodded. "Your shield?" "It's a very sturdy shield. And on top of that, it was so big it could cover him from chin to knee when he held it long ways." Andre narrowed his eyes. "I will hit it harder next time. I might hit you with some grass, too," Laura shouted. As if to emphasize her point, several of the sod tiles shifted closer to Alden. The pace picked up. Andre was not as speedy or as accurate as the third year. Sod chunks flew at Alden much more frequently than cudgel blows did. But the cudgel strikes were a lot more powerful. This was proven when Andre aimed too low and sent one of the sod trays flying across the gym, shedding clumps of grass and dirt. It attracted attention, and it wasn't long before a second-year adjuster joined the people on the other side of the wall and started lobbing small orbs of lightning at Alden. He had appalling aim, but he was making up for it with quantity. Alden had to begin jogging and actively dodging. And with more noise and activity in their section of the gym, they started to gain an audience. "You guys keep missing him. Only Laura is hitting him at all, and she is just getting him dirty." "Yeah, the attack team is at too much of a disadvantage if they can't see." "Left. The new boy is 10 meters to the left, Andre. Don't cheat." Greater than Andre shouted at the tattletale. After he'd sent a hit that smacked into the edge of Alden's suitcase shield. The guy who'd been practicing aerials and handsprings came and joined Alden's side of the wall. A girl bounded over to the other team with a plastic storage container full of what looked like tennis balls soaked in molasses, and a second later they were flying over with everything else. They left streaks of brown goo all over the floor, and when Alden accidentally stepped in one, both of his feet went out from under him in opposite directions. He ended up doing a high-speed split. He was not a person accustomed to doing full splits. What is this? Is it a power or a science project? He wondered as he tried to regain his footing. He had only stepped in the ooze with the toe of one foot, but both feet kept shooting out from under him like they were entirely greased. He hunkered behind his suitcase, laughing at the absurdity of his own situation as another cudgel blow came in from Andre. It hit the unpreserved case, which took it like a chunky heavyweight champion even though it and Alden both slid a few feet across the floor together. A second later, Alden experienced a sudden bodily lightness. It was like he'd been immersed in a pool without getting wet. "I think you might be able to stand up now. It's possible my zone counteracts whatever that substance is." The text had come from Max. He'd been in another part of the gym, running the drone he'd borrowed through a zone to test its effect. But it seemed he'd decided that there was a better opportunity for spell testing over here. He'd joined the runaway team, and he was standing on the edge of Andre's range with his arms stretched out toward Alden and a curious look on his face. "It's the one I used for track hurdles on assessment day," he called. "The levitating one?" Alden stood and gripped his bag. The preservation didn't kick back in. He was startled, and he knew his face showed it. He looked back at Max. Thank goodness he seemed to be entirely focused on Alden's feet. Even though it wasn't preserved, the case wasn't as heavy as it should have been. This isn't levitation, he thought as he took a single step. There's resistance. This zone really is more like being on the bottom of a pool. He'd only caught glimpses of Max using this spell while they both ran track. He'd seen him drifting over the hurdles, and he'd assumed a low-gravity environment was going on. This was even wilder. Alden was sure he'd be able to swim through the air if he tried. Not that he was going to make the attempt if it showed off his skill's weakness. It would inevitably come out eventually if they were all fighting each other in class and club regularly, but there was no reason to hasten the process. Of course it would be Max with a spell that interfered. Alden had actually tried the bearer of all burdens out in the pool one day at the North of North Gym, and he'd been able to make it work fine. I guess this is undeniably somebody else's magic giving the suitcase a helping hand. Maybe if he was attacking me with the spell instead of assisting, I could work around. The spell cut out suddenly and his suitcase was instantly preserved. The zone had only lasted a few seconds, but it had overridden the unnatural slickness. Alden waved his thanks to Max and jumped onto the nearest patch of grass. Since you guys are making a mess anyway, I'm joining in, someone said, and Alden turned to see the club president stomping over to join the other team. Rahul was pushing a shopping cart full of what looked like the entire contents of a rummage sale, and his fully assembled cannon was on top. Why does it look so squishy in places? It looks like he tried to make a gun around someone's black beanbag chair. Alden was sure it worked, since the club president was already a part-time university student. Did he call it a multi-object launcher? A second later there was a shrill sound followed by a deep thunk, and a garden gnome covered in flaking paint sailed over the wall in an arc and landed right where Max had been standing a moment before. Its gnome hat broke off on impact. "All right." Rahul popped over the wall, boosting himself with his hands. "Alden, Max, are you okay with kill shots? I have the go-ahead from the others." Alden stared at the dead gnome. "Sure," he called back, feeling less certain than he sounded. "You can try to kill me, too," the president said encouragingly. He waved. "Do your best." He dropped back down. Alden thought he was close enough to skill fatigue to justify some caution, so he stopped preserving his ring. He had taken quite a few hits on the suitcase by now, and it was harder on him anyway with 200 pounds of sandbag weight constantly banging into his shield. He had handicapped his skill enough now, and he wanted to focus on soaking whatever damage the others were dishing out. He stepped sideways to dodge some more badly aimed ball lightning, and not long after that, something that looked like a broken boat paddle came whistling toward him with scary accuracy. It bounced off of his suitcase only to be followed in rapid succession by a bowling pin, a frying pan with a missing handle, and a half-disassembled boombox. Holy cow, he can fire anything out of that gun. Alden ran for his life, leaping from patch of ground to patch of ground to avoid the magic molasses on the floor, trying to make full use of his trait for the first time all night. Max took a powerful hit from Andre's cudgel, and then, not long after it, he died to something that looked like the dish of a concrete bird bath. Alden would totally have died, too, if his suitcase wasn't so oversized. Or if Rahul wasn't being forced to launch things in arcs because of the wall. If a freaking garden gnome flies at you in a straight line, that's really bad. And someone with a multi-object gun had endless ammunition as long as they weren't stuck in a barren wasteland. Just pick up some garbage and bang. Alden suspected the third-year Riot had some kind of skill or spell that was helping him instantly determine the trajectory of his projectiles, too. No way was he just correctly guessing how all those things with different sizes, shapes, and weights were going to land every time. 5 minutes until you need to clean up. Instructor Plum called merrily from the referee post she had taken up a moment before, just after finishing up her conversations with everyone who'd needed her attention. "Alden, what have you got in your bag? I'm so happy to see you and Max at club." Alden didn't want to answer because it would give people another way of targeting him. The Life Shaper girl didn't need any more help. She had really gotten the hang of giving directions to the others. "It's 100 kilos of sandbags, instructor." Rahul shouted for him. "Oh. How exciting. Yes, I see. I was going to suggest you try something like that, and you've already beaten me to it." To Alden's surprise, she ran over to join him, sweeping away the slippery stuff and debris all over the floor in front of her with her pet water balls. "Are you just weight testing today?" she asked curiously, while he held the suitcase over his head and squatted near the base of the wall. Rahul wasn't having much luck lobbing things this close. "Or are you going to do something else? Would you like suggestions?" Some sod smacked into the hood of her raincoat and she ignored it. "I bet she has 20 suggestions." Alden, panting, looked up at her from his protected froggy position. "Honestly? I want to know what it feels like to be able to throw a 200-pound suitcase." She beamed. "Well, of course you do. Who wouldn't? Let's aim for Rahul. He's graduating soon. You can hit the others with suitcases any time. How are you going to do it?" Alden couldn't help but smile back at her. He heard a muffled oath as Handspring Guy started sliding around on the floor. "I thought I could jump," he whispered, "on one of the sod tiles. And get him from above. He could use his trait to jump really high if he was here, where there would be no permanent consequences for a bad landing." "A fine experiment," Instructor Plym whispered back. "I suggest waiting until you see something fly over. He's not that fast on the reload. Or do it when he starts swearing. Francis has been instilling a suggestion that Rahul has no right hand for the past 10 minutes, and he's about to unleash it." At Alden's surprised look, she made the flicking motions that the sway used to activate his bell rings. "So that's how a mind control bell works?" He'd been hearing Francis ringing away for the whole club meeting, but he'd been too busy over here to see any effects his power might be having on his victims. Instructor Plym gave Alden a double thumbs up, then jogged over to talk to Max. He was taking the opportunity to see what effects all of the incoming objects and rapidly changing surfaces had on his speed zone spell. Alden could have sworn he'd seen him typing notes to himself shortly after being murdered by the bird bath. A plastic baby doll with most of its hair missing flew at the terrible gymnast, who still hadn't caught his footing, and it bounced off his back. A pure humiliation shot. "Come on, man. I'll get revenge for you, Caleb." Francis's voice shouted from somewhere behind them. Ding ding. Rahul started to swear. Alden moved. Is this really going to work? He had an image in his mind of it working. Of him sailing up 10 feet in the air and spiking a 200-pound suitcase, like a monstrous version of a volleyball player. More of a two-handed heave than a spike. The suitcase was an unwieldy size even if his authority was carrying the bulk of the load. But he was excited. His blood was rushing in his ears. He didn't care if he hit the club president. He wasn't sure he was even going to aim for him. He didn't want to fake kill anyone really. He just wanted to feel himself do it, something new, ridiculous, and superhuman. He aimed for the sod tray he'd had his eyes on. He hit it with an approximation of the good form he'd been practicing with Bobby, only too hard. And with a suitcase. He bounced like he'd been thrown up by a trampoline. He cleared the wall in an instant and looked down on the group that had gathered on the other side. Andre with his club, Laura gesturing wildly to make her grass clumps fly and calling out instructions, the electricity guy with his eyes closed summoning up another shot. And a few more people who'd joined the free-for-all at the end. Rahul was there, with his cart still half full of junk, shoving some other random thing into the depths of his launcher with his one good arm. Most of them were grinning like idiots. Alden felt himself doing it, too. He flung the suitcase. Someone shouted a warning at Rahul too late, but Alden had been aiming at the right dwindling supplies anyway. As he fell hard on the floor, he heard a loud crash and a surprised yell. Right ankle sprain. Instructor Plym had set the gym to provide them with the breakdowns of their injuries for their information. The low pain setting meant a sprained ankle barely even stung. Alden ignored it, staring up as a whole shopping cart flipped up into the air and over the edge of the foam wall, taking out a section and spilling junk objects everywhere. "Holy shit! What a cannonball!" Francis yelled. "Rahul, Rahul!" called someone watching from the bleachers. Laughter was in their voice. "Did you just take your own broken microwave in the face?" Luna Plym leaned over Alden with her hands on her hips. Her red hair clashed with the raincoat. "Well, what was it like?" she asked. "It was so much fun," he said. "I just wish I could have seen it a little better." "Don't worry about that." She pointed up at a drone hovering around over their heads. "I've got it on film." She pulled him onto his feet. "And you can try it again next week. That works, too. Welcome to the B-list. Now, about that fishing line you brought on testing day, have you considered selecting something a little easier for you to handle? Or maybe you could try." Chapter 97. Alden didn't write his name or the names of any future targets on the beat list. He did see a lot of the other bees update their personal hit lists, though, while he was putting his sandbags back in the correct stack. Not a single bag had burst. They were bulletproof, according to Rahul. You might as well be bulletproof, too, Alden thought as he zipped his empty suitcase back up and lifted the telescoping handle. Though it had been wounded during its assault on the club president's cart full of junk, it hadn't died yet. It had a crushed corner, and one of the front pockets was badly ripped. But its wheels hadn't taken a hit. It still worked, so it was obviously volunteering for one more round of duty. Not joining the competitive crowd? Max asked him. He was putting the drone he'd borrowed earlier back on its shelf. Nah. Who was Alden going to put on a hit list anyway? Winston? He'd had his fun beating the guy at the drinking game. Besides, the speedster was so jealous of Finley he was practically punishing himself, and targeting a particular classmate for the sake of it sounded like a recipe for hard feelings all around. If I beat someone, I beat them. If I lose, I lose. I've got enough goals to keep me busy for the next couple of years anyway. Rahul said not to bother with the list unless it was motivating. Alden's motivation was growing more powerful so that in the future, doing the right thing would be easier and he would be less likely to die in painful, gruesome ways. One-upping a guy from New Hampshire in gym class didn't really inspire him. Anyway, the girl at the top of the list who seemed to be systematically destroying second-year A's wasn't even participating by choice. Francis and Bibi had put her there, and they were keeping track of her victories every week. Ella Clara. She'd occupied Instructor Plym's time for most of the hour, discussing something. Alden hadn't seen her using any powers. Probably a good attitude, Max said. I don't think we're going to be dueling in class on the first day anyway. Competing in some fashion seems unavoidable, but just throwing us at each other again and saying fight wouldn't be that practical. True. A lot of their classmates were anticipating or dreading duels, but if there was a fighting component to gym tomorrow, it would hopefully involve someone who knew what they were doing actually teaching them. Instead of everyone going at each other in a repeat of assessment day. Max wasn't making any moves to add his own name to the list either. They headed for the locker room. Do you know what the girl at the top of the beat list does? Alden asked. Max nodded. Figurinist. Figurinist? Take a minute to look it up if you need to, Max said. I had to. They put on magic puppet shows? Am I remembering that right? Figurinist was an ultra-rare he'd only read a brief description of when he was looking through class lists. And I thought they were all low ranks? He added as he claimed a stall for himself to change in. I mean actually low. Not apex low. They were. Max's voice echoed. The system made around a dozen of them over the years. All Ds and Fs. Guess it was field testing. And now it's made a B just one as far as anyone knows. She might as well be a U-type. Alden looked up the class while he dressed. He found a channel where a Tibetan figurinist in an avowed zone showed off his powers. A small man-shaped figurine, made of what looked like aluminum foil, walked around a miniature kitchen and fried a quail egg in a tiny pan. That's some seriously fine detail and control. I'm glad this guy is raking in views. It's like a little mind-controlled doll. Just one? Just one. But Ella Clara's is bigger according to the girl I asked. How big? The same size as her. Cool. If a mini one could fry an egg, then a big one could probably fight. He stepped out of the stall. Max was changing shoes on one of the benches. Before you go, he said, just as Alden was turning to head out the door, that favor you owe me. From the party. He's calling it in already? That's fast. Have you got anything but your skill in haunting sphere? Is answering doing you the favor, or are you checking to see what kind of favors I can do for you? Alden asked. Max looked up from his shoelaces. Don't be cheap. It's the second. Unless you're about to make some kind of major revelation. I can interrupt weak enchantments, Alden said. And make small flames. Light candle. Utility abilities, Max said thoughtfully. Okay. Have fun tonight. Yeah. You too. Line of asterisks. Alden didn't realize why they'd just told each other to have fun until he stepped out of the bright Magiffies building. The campus pathway lights had all been cut off, and lines of small lamps shone along rooftops and walkways. He'd seen a few last night from his dorm window, but he'd collapsed after all the shopping and furniture moving and hadn't thought much of it. Right. A lot of people are celebrating Diwali, and tonight there are supposed to be. A crackling sound filled his ears, increasing in volume, and he stared up as a silver-blue comet sailed overhead, leaving a trail of subtle luminescence in its wake. It didn't look like any firework he'd ever seen. And it was just the first of a dozen light shows he would run across as he made his way back to the dorms. A group of university students on glow-in-the-dark bicycles were trick-riding around the campus. Some of them definitely knew what they were doing with their spells. Alden saw a trio ride up the side of the Forthright building, where they were greeted with loud cheers by the high schoolers on the roof. It was a big crowd, judging by the number of beams, fireballs, and other glitzy spells going up into the air from that location. There were teens, and quite a few adults, running around with sparklers. And Alden paused for several minutes to admire the hard work of a team of shapers who were building a multi-element mandala pattern in the air over the entrance to one of the dormitories. Garden Hall had its own light display, courtesy of someone who had programmed small drones to fly around making emojis over the planters. As he approached, he thought he recognized the girl standing beside a pot of basil, staring up at a winking smiley. When another one of the silver comet fireworks shot across the sky, its light illuminated her well enough for him to be sure. Maricel. He jogged over, his suitcase bouncing along the pavers behind him. Hi, Alden. Are you still moving things from intake? She asked, looking at the luggage. No. This is my partner. We do battle together. At her perplexed expression, he shook his head. Never mind. Weird joke. I'm all moved in. How are you doing with your roommates? I'm fine. The glowing drones behind her head were reshaping themselves into a hand. I read something on the internet. I wanted to ask someone who would know about it personally, and I thought maybe you would. Do you mind? Of course not. What is it? Was she waiting here just to catch me then? She could have texted. She smiled at him. Okay. I didn't know much about Avowed before I became one. I was studying, and I read that sometimes when we get summoned by the Artonans we can pick our return point. People were saying that maybe a lot of Avowed who go missing aren't really. They just didn't want to come back to Anzidora. What? This wasn't the last question Alden would have expected, but it was a long way down the list. If that's what you want to know, you should probably ask some of our classmates. I can introduce you to my roommates. Lexi, Hoyu, and Lute would have more data points to draw on them if they'd ever heard their families mention it. I've only been summoned once. It just took me a really long time to get back. Her smile tightened. I don't want to ask anyone else. I don't want an Anzidora person's answer. I want a real answer. But their parents' experiences would be more average and repeatable than mine. He glanced down at the hand resting on his suitcase handle. The magic ring was still on his finger. Maricel sounded serious. Was she hoping to get back home that way? Well, it's probably more achievable than the land bridge plan, And considering the fact that I just cat smuggled my friend off the island, I'm definitely not someone who ought to be all, oh no, Maricel. Running away from Isidora is bad. I hadn't put a lot of thought into it, he said. At least, he hadn't considered how it applied to Avowed in general instead of him specifically. We have a right to be dropped back where we left from or in the nearest safe location. I've heard it somewhere in the original contract terms. And given how teleportation infrastructure works, the system probably prefers to send us to the TC here on the island, so I doubt that's ever off the table if you ask for it. But he thought over what he knew about Artonans, Summonariums, and Thwarthog, with her lockers covered in travel magnets and her advice about seeing the world as an unregistered. When you get summoned, if your summoner is willing, I bet you could get sent back almost anywhere on Earth you wanted that wasn't inherently private or secure. How likely would it be? Maricel asked. She was staring into his eyes intently. Would many wizards do that for one of us? Again, I haven't interacted with that many wizards. But he went through the list of them in his head. Joe, Stuart single quote H, Alice Art single quote H, the primary, T qual. Heck, let's throw Jelner and Viewlart single quote H in there for good measure. And Kibby. Wow, a high percentage of my known wizards lists is the Art single quote H family. Preserving a footless guy and getting lost in a chaos field can really change your social circle. Maricel was still waiting for him to answer her question. The drones behind her were making an exclamation point. Appropriate. All of them, Alden said finally. What? He nodded. Definitely talk to some other Avowed before you make any life plans based on my experiences. But I think even the most unpleasant wizards I've met would have changed my teleportation destination to another Earth location if I asked. He'd almost called Jel Nor and Tequal the normal wizards, but that was a bit too revealing of a thing to say out in public. It begged the question, how many abnormal wizards has Alden Thorne met? And in what ways were they abnormal? Tequal would be the least likely to do someone a favor, but even she would probably privilege an Avowed's easily granted request over human laws she had no obligation to know, much less follow. All she'd have to do is punch a few buttons on a tablet. Maricel's eyes widened. So it's true. Why would they do that? Don't they care about? They consider Isidora to be a human idiosyncrasy. I'm sure it's convenient for them in some ways just like it is for us. A lot of the magical resources we have might not have been given to us if Avowed were scattered all over the planet, right? But the idea of average people confining people who can do magic to a specific country is really alien to them. He was sure that at some point, when the concept of Isidora was proposed, someone would have asked the wizards if they could force Avowed to stay put here when they weren't in use. He was betting the idea had gotten zero traction. Too culturally topsy-turvy from an Artonan point of view. Maricel, you do know anything we say outside of private residences is probably being picked up by Infagir, right? I mean. He shrugged at her. She tucked her chin. I know that. I'm not planning to break any rules. Then why are you asking how to break rules? Granted, it was rule-breaking in a way that was impossible for anyone to prevent. There's no reason I can't discuss things with you, she continued. I'm just curious about something I read. We don't have to talk about it here if you don't want to. I don't mind. I've told you everything I know about it anyway. I've only brought up Isidora specifically with two wizards, and they both think Avowed living here is really quirky. Alden rested his arms on top of his suitcase handle. But an Avowed who wanted to spend their life in hiding that way, Maricel shifted and looked away from him. Would have to get summoned first, he concluded. Her fingers toyed with a basil leaf she'd plucked from the plant beside them, and the scent of it filled the air. Is there a way to make that happen quicker, or? As far as that goes, I can't tell you anything more than the internet. Have valuable talents, and learn to use them well. Level up and pick more good talents. Have a friend who gets summoned often recommend you to a wizard in person. Boaters. Alden was watching Manon's social media accounts. It looked like she got summoned to non-Leaf Song jobs sometimes. It had occurred to him that if he could contact the boater members when she was busy on another planet, that would be one more way to reduce her influence on them. You could also tell the system you wanted to be summoned, he added. The systems are the ones who recommend specific avowed to wizards, usually, so it can't hurt to let it know that you're eager to go. Even more explicit agreement probably makes it. Happy? She looked startled. You mean just talk to it? Sure. It's worth a try. He wanted to remind her that being summoned came with bucketloads of problems and risks. But she knew. She had agreed to the contract. She'd gotten the speech. She was aware the person she was talking to had almost died on another planet recently. She must really, really miss her family. Hey, the fireworks are amazing, aren't they? He said. I've never seen anything like them. I heard someone on a light-up bicycle say the best view is supposed to be from the bridge, and people on light-up bicycles usually know what they are talking about. You want to go there together? She blinked. Her face softened, but she shook her head. Thank you, Alden. That does sound like fun. But I've got plans for tonight. He watched her go. She ate the basil leaf she'd plucked. That's a good sign, isn't it? Angrily throwing the leaf on the ground would be bad. Eating it is more positive. Possibly, he was trying a little too hard to read a girl's mind via her interactions with an herb. A few seconds later, when he stepped through the door into Garden Hall, he received the "Welcome Home" message and a notification that something had been delivered for him earlier. There was a mailroom on the ground floor beside the laundry. He headed there and squatted down to reach the low post box the notification had indicated. As soon as the door swung open with a squeal, he recognized the sky blue fabric and frayed straps of the backpack he'd worn in middle school. Aunt Connie. She hadn't mentioned sending him anything the last time he had called her. He pulled the backpack out, and upon realizing that it smelled like his old bedroom, he couldn't help but sniff it a few times. His aunt had wired the main zippers shut with the twist tie from a bread bag. When he got the backpack open, he smiled. Now it's a lot more like being home. Alden. How'd the club meeting go? Hoyu asked when he entered their apartment. And what's that? He was in the kitchenette, holding a bag of oats in one hand and a slow cooker instruction manual in the other. The B-list was fun. Instructor Plim is our advisor, so that's going to be really helpful. I put 100 kilos of sand in my suitcase and threw it at the club president's junk cart. And this is my wombat. He held up Wummy. My aunt sent him. With 4 jars of hot jardinera. The fireworks are different than I was expecting. Are they? I've seen non-magical fireworks shows on movies, and they do always look simpler. Luke's going to go see the volley. Lexi went to buy earplugs so that he can sleep early. The volley? The Apex Rite workshops and the F-City Rite workshops have barges set up on either side of the bridge, and they take turns firing off all of their best magic missiles and fireworks. It's the most popular thing to do. There are also some festival events in different neighborhoods. There's a street closed to traffic and entirely covered in rangoli near Nilama Marina and a big temple that's always decorated. Are you going out? Hoyu groaned. I know I shouldn't, he said. Tomorrow's my first official day of high school, and I want to make a good impression on my instructors. And we just had Khan's party. But if you eat a healthy breakfast, it makes up for staying out late the night before, doesn't it? He held up his oats. There would be oatmeal in the school cafeterias in the mornings for sure. But Hoyu seemed to have taken his mother's doubts about his plans to cook for himself personally. Sounds logical. Can't I come with you, or are you meeting friends? Maybe if you'd grown up watching competing teams of rites blasting magic at the night sky, you could casually plug your ears and go to sleep like Lexi. But Alden didn't want to miss out on something like this. You can't just take it for granted that you'll be here to see it again next year. Hoyu's expression turned pained at his question, and he texted instead of answering out loud. I'm going with Khan and a bunch of people he's gathered. You can come. I invited Loot, but he doesn't want to see some of the people we're going with. So he says he can just go alone. I'll ask to go with Luke then. A surprisingly obvious decision. Loot had been really easy to get along with all weekend. Alden dropped Wummy off in his room. He fit right in. Wombats belonged on top of learning cushions. Then, he went and knocked on Loot's door. When it swung open, he was surprised to see Loot in plain clothes. Instead of one of his usual interesting outfits, he seemed to aiming for comfort. And maybe he was trying to be incognito. He was wearing his combat boots, baggy black sweatpants, and a plain gray shirt. He had left off the eye patch and covered his hair with a knit cap. "Hey, can't I follow you around and watch the fireworks?" Alden asked. "I figure you know where you're going." Loot brightened. "Sure. I'll be your tour guide. Lexi's a bore. Who tries to sleep through this?" He looked happy. So he must have wanted company. Just not most company. "Should I invite some people I know from intake to meet up with us?" Alden asked. "They are living between campus and the span. The friends you wanted to bring to the apartment? If they're cool, that's fine with me." "Great." He texted Natalie. She and Hadaisa were about to start classes in the same program as Loot, so they should get to know each other. They would all probably have more fun with a local showing them the way around tonight, and none of the intake girls were going to care about island politics and the Vilras. It was good for everyone. "We were about to head out," Natalie replied a moment later. "Did you see the big silver comets going by? Come pick us up at the new place. The kitchen is amazing." Line of asterisks. 15 minutes later, Alden and Loot were sitting side by side on a crowded bus. "Your friends are rabbits," Loot said. "What do? They are not trying to be hero rabbits like you, right? That's not becoming a trend." Alden could hear the rapid pops of firecrackers through the bus window. "It's the next big thing," he answered. "You should have heard one of the uni faculty on my interview committee talking about how charming I'd look saving people in designer shoes and a tailcoat. You're going to have to tell me why you picked that class one day. After all, you could have chosen almost anything." Loot, more than most people, knew how true that was. For now, Alden could deflect by answering his other question. "Natalie's got cook of the moment. She's going to be in arts with you. She plans to be the best private chef in the universe. She was helping me with my diet until this weekend, and I think I'm going into withdrawal." Luke stared at him. "Hadaisa's got an object beautification skill. She's in arts, too. She's not sure what she wants to do for a career yet, outside of being summoned. I know they're both really excited about starting classes, so they might ask you a ton of questions. Elijah's at Franklin High. She's an F, so she couldn't apply to CNH. She insta-fixes small patches of chip paint. She likes it here on Anzidora a lot. I think she just wishes she had enough power to blend in more." "What's wrong with you, man?" Luke's voice was exasperated. He yanked off the hat and the oversized glow-in-the-dark novelty glasses he'd put on before they left the dorm. "What? All of the people we're meeting up with are girls. And you weren't going to mention it? I have hat hair. I'm dressed like a bum. And I didn't bring any of my cool eye patches. They don't care what you look like. It's dark. And we're going to be watching fireworks." Luke scrubbed his hands through his hair. "Do they like musicians?" "Probably a normal amount. I should go back to the room and change." He stared down at his sweatpants. "I could meet up with you later." "That'll take forever." "You're fine." Luke gave him a flat look. "I don't get a lot of chances to make first impressions on people who don't have preconceived notions about me. I'm not sure if you're a good roommate for taking me to meet girls or a bad roommate for taking me to meet girls without warning. You're not meeting girls. You're being a tour guide for people who still don't know everything about Anzidora. Don't be weird around Natalie. She's my friend. I'm not going to be weird. I'm going to be ugly, short, and badly dressed." "You're not ugly. Why don't you just stab me in the other eye?" Luke started muttering to himself darkly. It took Alden a minute to realize the muttering had turned song-like. He glanced away from the window and saw Luke surreptitiously making rapid hand signs over his lap. "Are you chaining right now?" He didn't answer. As Luke finished up, Alden became aware that he was uneven. It was the first time since he'd met him in conversation class a week ago. "One more," Luke said. "Maybe the one that." He started up again, and when he finished, he sat back and straightened his shoulders. His expression relaxed. "What did you do?" Alden asked. "The second was a common one that increases self-confidence. Great for socializing, but use with caution in dangerous environments. The first was one of my personal favorites. It makes me look cooler." Alden examined him closely. "It's not noteworthy when I'm just sitting here. It's a multi-layered effect that increases bodily awareness and control. Stat points can do similar things, but this is more flexible. And temporary, obviously. I don't quite. It'll be easier for me to move how I want to move for the next few hours," Luke said. "The more you practice with it, the better it gets. I've practiced with it. Honestly, too much. It's great for when I play my harp, but it helps with all kinds of other things. I've been training my facial expressions with it. Tell me to mimic an emotion. Do a happy smile. Could you be more dull? Fine, what's a hard one? Look like I just hurt your feelings." Luke's eye widened. His brows lifted and tilted slightly. His lips parted, and a small gasp escaped him. Alden was impressed against his will. If he'd seen this expression in passing, he would absolutely have known that Luke's feelings were hurt, and on top of that. "How are you making me think that whoever hurt you was definitely in the wrong?" "Just a touch of vulnerability," said Luke. "Works every time. I started doing this thinking I'd excel at an acting class." "What's the fallout from the chain like?" Alden asked. "For regular people, I mean. I know it might be different. Imagine the klutziest you've ever been," Luke said at once. "And then triple it. I broke 6 different things, including a toe, before I decided to stop being stupid and just go to bed when I'm paying my dues. Lack of bodily awareness actually makes it really easy to fall asleep. But you've got to remember to empty your bladder before bed. And make sure you're not in some contorted posture that's going to hurt when you wake up. A word chain that gave you better control of your body at the price of a good night's sleep sounded blissful. The warning about bladder control is concerning, but I doubt it would be one of his favorite word chains if that was a major issue. Could you teach me that one sometime?" "Oh." Luke gave him a smile that was perfectly apologetic. "I don't think so. It's one of your family's exclusive chains, I guess." "That's fine. It's not that exclusive. There are different levels of restriction with word chains. To teach you this one, all I'd have to do is put you in a conference call with someone I work with on Artona 2 and formally vouch for your integrity. It would be a long conference call because the guy likes to hear himself talk, but it's not like it's impossible for me to get permission. That's all there is to it. The impediment to getting access to more word chains is having a pinky promise a wizard that you're a good person." Then the rest of what Luke had said caught his attention. "So you've definitely been summoned then? I was almost positive you had based on what you said in conversation class, but, yeah, I get summoned. I've got an official work calendar and everything. I might occasionally disappear without warning, too. Don't freak out if it happens. It's not like a real emergency summons. I don't do anything physically dangerous." He stood as the bus slowed to a stop. "I probably can't teach you that chain because it's difficult. Word chains are. I guess you'd call them picky? Some of them more than others. The low-power, publicly available ones are the easiest to cast." He hopped lightly down the bus steps and onto the sidewalk. Alden followed him, listening avidly. The more powerful they are, or the more esoteric their uses are, the more likely they are to be lazy bastards that refuse to work. "Oh, free sparklers. Thanks," he said at last to a woman in a long skirt who was walking past with baskets of them. He took a handful. "You were saying?" Alden prompted, when Luke started looking around for people with more freebies instead of continuing his speech. "To make harder chains work for you, you need to have just the right combo of body modifications or be a perfectionistic glutton for tedium. Or all of the above. Being higher ranked also helps, but don't ask me why because the only answer I have is allies. and hers is some nonsense about magically powerful people being more in tune with universal vibrations. He frowned. Or you could be a prodigy like Hazel and just feel how to be good at them. I'd still like to try, said Alden. I mean, if you don't mind teaching me. I don't plan to make word chains a huge part of my daily life, but that's another thing. The more you do them, the more forgiving they are about mistakes. So those two I just used on the bus? I can only mumble them like that because the self-confidence one is weak, and I've done the other one so much. I have to be really precise with my words and signing when I'm mastering a strong new one. This way, Alden pointed toward the building indicated on his interface map. Your friends are living on the edge of Boomtown to save on rent. Luke nodded. A courageous choice. The Wrights don't actually blow people up, do they? Themselves. Occasionally. Mostly the problem is the noise, the smells, and the lack of conveniences. Even if you shield your place, you still have to walk through the neighborhood to get around. And nobody's going to put a decent restaurant in an area full of Wright workshops. It wasn't long before they were standing outside the girl's apartment. Lute had just finished finger-combing his hair when Hadassah answered the door. We might really not be dressed well enough to hang out with them, Alden though. Hadassah was in a fitted black turtleneck dress, and she was decked out in gold accessories. She had definitely given everything the skill treatment. Even the gold metal bands wrapped around her long ponytail were so shiny they practically glowed. Your outfit looks amazing, Hadassah. It's the thief. Greater than Elijah bounced into view from a side room, wearing a silver sequined jacket over a red shirt that matched her lipstick and her fingernails. She'd once told Alden that there was no excuse for a paint fixer to ever be without polish. Natalie, he's here. Don't look into his sad puppy eyes when he talks about your guacamole. Greater than. Hey. I was just complimenting her. You were trying to convince her to give you more food, Hadassah said. Elijah grabbed the door and threw it open wider. She's going to practice meat now, and we like it that way. Greater than beef ribs, said Hadassah. Candied bacon, said Elijah. Lamb stew. Fried chicken. He swallowed. Don't drool in front of people, Alden. Have some self-respect. Luke cleared his throat. All right, said Alden. Let me introduce you to my roommate. This is Luke Volra. Lute, the kind one is Hadassah, and the mean one is Elijah. Elijah stuck her tongue out at him. You guys, Lute's in the art school, too. He's a harpist. He's really talented. Alden had thought he was at the funeral anyway. He had multiple instruments and a disdain for his classmates' skills. It suggested some degree of talent. Lute held out his sparklers and smiled winningly. Alden suggested you might like a tour guide for the night. Sorry, I'm in sweats. I was moving furniture right before we left, and I didn't want to make him late to meet up with you. Alden stared down at his shameless, lying face. He texted him. His moving furniture and a Sidran slang for eating a steak and blue cheese sandwich in the bath. As the girls turned to lead the way into the place, Lute's fingers moved rapidly. You're a good man. You called me talented. We're friends, aren't we? He was wearing a puppy dog look that even Elijah couldn't have found fault with. Alden rolled his eyes. Fine. As far as I know, you were bench pressing the bathtub for 3 hours while you inhaled fries. A minute later, they were politely admiring the kitchen, and Alden was resisting a powerful urge to steal a fistful of granola from a glass canister beside the pizza oven, when Natalie stepped out of her room. Sorry, y'all. It's late back home, but my parents still didn't want me to hang up the phone. Hi. You must be Alden's roommate. Alden, you finally got roommates. I do. This is Lute. He's looking like he just got hit in the face with a brick. Natalie wasn't even all dressed up like the others. She was wearing her rabbits and radishes blouse and jeans. Lute recovered quickly, at least. Maybe it was his word chain making him aware that he'd gone temporarily slack-jawed and mute. Natalie, he said. Nice to meet you. I was just telling Elijah and Hadassah that one of our roommates would be envious of your pot and pan collection. He pointed up at the copper cookware over the stove. With an unnecessarily dramatic and elegant arm motion, Alden had to give him credit for the attention to detail. Line of asterisks. They had a lot of fun. Luke knew where all the best light displays, street performances, and fireworks sellers were. When the crowd watching the volley from the apex half of the span turned out to be pretty crushing and Elijah started to look uncomfortable, he led them all to an oceanside high-rise that looked out over the bridge toward the lights of F-City. Amy's gone out. She doesn't mind if we use her balcony. Wow, said Natalie, looking around the place as they crossed a white tile floor strewn with clothes and shoes. This place is swanky. Except for the laundry everywhere, did Amy just strip and fling everything each time she walked through the door? She was right. The apartment was minimalist and modern, but there was something comfortable about it. Tailor environment, Hadassah said. It feels like it. I was thinking the same thing, greater than said Elijah. Yes, Luke said. My family doesn't believe in skimping on the magical amenities. Amy probably had the same rabbit do this place that the Grand Witch uses on Libra. Grand Witch? Natalie said. Libra? Alden asked. Grand Witch is my grandmother. Libra's her Megayich lair. And my former address. Luke slid open the balcony door. Wind rushed into the room, and the sheer curtains whipped around. Hang on. I forgot to activate the shielding. He stepped over to a series of foggy bubbles on the wall that Alden had mistaken for decorations and ran his fingers over them. They glimmered faintly, and the wind stopped. The balcony was obviously a major feature for the apartment, with a table, lounge chairs, and a hot tub that glowed with color-shifting lights. I want to get in. Greater than Elijah gazed at the tub longingly while everyone else stood at the railing looking out at one of the barges. The Wrights were firing up a device that made something that looked like plasma branch and twist over the water. Natalie held another sparkler out toward Alden, and he flicked his fingers over it. He'd been enjoying lighting them for everyone for the past couple of hours. It flared, casting sparks around her hands. She beamed at him. That's a great spell impression. I wouldn't mind having it for myself. There was a loud roar, and a band of white light as white as a river shot through the air over the bridge. The balcony was brighter than day for a few seconds, and then the light band broke apart and rained down over the ocean in sizzling motes. A bra is like a bathing suit. There's really no difference. Greater than there is, Hadassah said, glancing over at Elijah. Natalie nodded. Luke coughed. I'm sure Amy has swimsuits. You can borrow one. She's not someone who would mind. Or even notice. Over the course of the next 5 minutes, Elijah played with the settings on the tub, and the girls talked themselves into going to explore Amy's room in search of suits. As soon as they left, Luke rounded on Alden. Would it be good funny or bad funny if I got in the hot tub with all my clothes on? Considering the fact that you'd have to splash your way back home in wet sweatpants, it might be sad funny. And uncomfortable. I think I can make it look cool. That's the self-confidence Shane talking. I can definitely make it look cool. Alden chuckled. Luke stood on his tiptoes and leaned over the railing. This has been the greatest weekend. I wish I could rewind it and do it all again. You just want to torment Lexi with eye jokes. I'm going to do that anyway. It won't get old. They watched the barge on the other side of the bridge send up sprays of fireworks in the shape of a peacock's tail. Hey, I'll show you the physical gestures for the word chin tonight. We can practice them tomorrow in Convo IV. I'll correct you, and you can correct my garbage or tonin'. It'll make the class less boring for both of us. If you still want to do it after you see what a pain it is, I'll set up a call with my boss and get permission to teach you the full thing. Really? That was going to make that portion of his day so much more beneficial. Thanks. Bubble Tub, are you hot? Greater than Elijah appeared, wearing a very minimal red bikini and carrying a towel. Natalie and Hadassah were behind her in borrowed t-shirts over their swimsuits. It's fine to get these wet, too, isn't it? Natalie asked, gesturing at her shirt. It said Tokyo on the chest. Your cousin's a different size than us, so the suits are. "Little boobs," said Hadassah, already slipping into the water. Loot smiled at them all graciously. "Amy will not mind. Her house is your house. Help yourselves." A second later, Alden got a text from him. "Don't thank me. I should be thanking you." Then he walked right over and stepped into the tub, combat boots and all. Tobe continued, "Thanks for listening.